afternoon. I'd like to thank Alan, I don't know where he went, can you hear me? Are we good? Okay.
No.
I know you're deaf. Anyways, I don't know how well I'm going to do with this because I have a nerve disorder. and shockingly it gets affected by this kind of stuff. So I want to say hello to everyone who I don't know, and thank you very much for coming. And for all of those who do know me, I'm just really sorry. It's true. I'd like to start by sharing a bit about myself for those who don't know my path. I was diagnosed with remitting relapsing MS in 2005, and after being hit by a drunk driver. In 2009, my MS was upgraded or downgraded, I guess, depending on your perspective, to Marburg variants, which is the rarest and only malignant form of multiple sclerosis. I'm having a MS moment here, so just have to mind me. When my disease changed from normal MS, and that sounds horrible, and don't get me wrong, because there's people in here with MS, and I thank you all for coming. And I don't mean to say normal MS because that's not proper, but when mine moved into something more severe, they started two different last resort drugs for me, or treatments, not really drugs. One was plasmapheresis, which is a technical term for plasma exchange, which is simply just cleaning my blood and throwing out my diseased antibodies in the garbage, and then placing them with albutin, which is just human blood that's donated. So, and I have that written in here. I do. I should probably look down here. So for those who do donate blood, thank you very much, because it helps and saves people every day, and so very, very important. And they also did chemotherapy. Cyclophosphamide chemotherapy for a year and a half to suppress my immune system to keep it so I could function, and it worked. It worked really well for a year and a bit, and then it started to fail too. And I had been through all MS medications, and none of them did any good for me. And so that's where that is. By the end of January of 2011, I had ended my career and had been getting out of my truck for the last and final time. I had an issue with giving up. I had an issue with giving up, or giving in. I don't know. And so I had been a long haul truck driver for 15 years. And the last 2 years, my company, after my first paralysis, my company made it so I couldn't cross the border anymore. Apparently, I have really good health insurance, but U.S. funds would have been millions to get me home, so that was the end of that. And then, at the end of January, Kyle picked me up from my truck and brought me home. That was January 29th. And then February and March and April, I continued to spiral downhill. Somewhere in there, I'm not sure when that happened, but I ended up being paralyzed from my waist down, and in one of those 3 months. And here's where I'm going to read from the excerpt of my book, our book, because without that pretty lady over there, I mean, I was doing a book, but it was not progressing near. And this one, just to say, and this is just a light-hearted note on my stuff, this would have taken longer, and Alicia wouldn't have been so put under the gun if we hadn't thought I was dying again last year. So, because her words to me were, if you die before this book is written, I'll kill you. So apparently, as I'm still here, that did not happen, but the book came out way faster than it was supposed to. So, there you go. And that's that tale. So, here is an excerpt from our book. The doctors, oh no, that's not. Where's, oh, that's the end. Never mind.
Don't read the end.
No. I just mean the end of the excerpt.
Okay.
Yeah, no, not the end. Okay. My MS symptoms were becoming severe. I was surprised because I didn't think it could get much worse than what I had already endured. It seemed like every time I said, it can't get any worse than this, I would have to retract my statement immediately. I was experiencing MS hugs, which is a far cry from the warm and inviting embrace that the name may sound like. It feels like a constriction around my rib cage, painful spasms while it clenches my diaphragm. With each breath it worsens as I fight for oxygen. I was experiencing them sporadically, and they utterly terrified me. Its other more appropriate nickname is the squeeze of death. Many times its cause is neuropathic, but when it is actually activating the intercostal muscles in the rib cage, within the rib cage, is when it becomes deadly. I was also having banding on all areas of my body at different times. It basically feels like a girdle tightening around whatever part it wants to, as it chooses to, on any given day. Every symptom that inhabited my body was progressively getting worse. I flailed through to March 2011. My health was spiraling rapidly downhill at a pace I could hardly conceive. The most prominent memories I have of this time is my failing health on April 9th. My friend Vicky, I don't know where she is, I know she's here somewhere. My friend Vicky and her twins were over for dinner the night before, and it was a lovely normal evening. She had left and I went to bed. When I awoke, I was paralyzed from my breastbone down. I opened my eyes, realizing that I could not move, and I was scared, but I didn't panic. I feared it was just another episode, and all I needed was more rest. Kyle wanted to take me to the hospital, but I had no desire to be poked and prodded. I knew I could lie in bed a lot more comfortably at home. He reluctantly agreed and spent the next 2 days transferring me from bed to the couch. The following Monday he went to work, and I called my nurse Kathy at the MS clinic. I think we have a problem again, was how I started that conversation. I explained to her what was happening, and she could hear the slight labor in my breathing. She scolded me for not going to the hospital, but was sympathetic to my reasoning. She had to find me a bed, as there were no beds in the Foothills Hospital. All the beds in the Foothills were occupied. The next morning, she called and asked if we could be at the hospital by 5 p.m. She had finally found me a bed. I agreed, and Kyle came home from work to drive me. Kyle called a friend to assist me in transferring me from the house to the truck. They walled me in with pillows, just so I wouldn't topple over. Even in this terrifying and worrisome time, I must say that going to the hospital as a high-risk patient has its perks. No line, no cover. When we arrived, I was immediately placed in a room with a bed and put under observation. Once again, I was in the hospital for an undisclosed amount of time. Sorry.
It's okay, Fiona, it's not a race.
The doctors treated my UTI, and by day 2 they put in a central line for my second try at plasmapheresis. This was accompanied by new prescriptions for excessive amounts of drugs. They started me on an excess of medications. The meds seemed to help me improve, but they produced peculiar side effects. A week into my stay, I saw what looked like diamonds and ice crystals. I can't see. Ice crystals in my left eye. There they were floating, and every so often would move and form a concentric shape. They checked me, but I wasn't suffering from retinal detachment. By the end of April, my mind was snapping. This is when I lost my being. That's what I call losing my mind. My medical file dictates that the doctors weren't aware my mind was questionable until the 7th of May. I know I was feeling off at the end of April, probably even before that. I remember lying in bed anxiously anticipating the royal wedding that was airing in the early morning hours. I am thoroughly upset that I have no memory of it. On April 30th, my memory is extremely patchy. Looking back, April 30th is the last day I have any clear memories until the end of May. I was in bed, having had my last infusion of cyclophosphamide in a year and a half. That day I remember Bill, an old friend of mine from the program, sitting beside me. We were chattering about something meaningless. I know I felt uncomfortable with him there. I remember feeling sad and scared. On May 1st, still confined to the hospital, I began to feel puffy with a band-like pain across my torso. On May 5th, a doctor and I discussed an action plan that consisted of rehab, followed by making plans for assisted living with the help of the social worker in the hospital. May 7th, they started my rehabilitation. Everything from this point on is for the next month is recounted from my file notes. During this time, I somehow withdrew into myself, into a coma. It wasn't the type of coma where all is quiet and dismal while my loved ones sit and wait for a response. Physically, I was very much there, animated and seemingly stark raving mad. The same day they removed the central line from my neck, I was suffering from distractible bouts of head shakes. A week prior to the onset of my vexatious head shakes, the proverbial loss of my being, I noticed that my mood was most certainly suffering. I felt depressive and tearful. Yeah, that happens a lot apparently. Understandable to the situation, of course, but it got to the point where it was labeled in my chart as altered mentally. A couple of days passed, and around this time, they stopped most of my medications. The confusion began to engulf my mind. I had hallucinations seeing animals, including cats and even children. I was responsive but perplexing staff and visitors with tangential and disjointed speech, and being inappropriate with my facial expressions. I would sneer and smile maniacally for no apparent reason and at inappropriate times. For the next day proved to be worse than the last. It was noted in my file that my behavior had become outright bizarre, and I was certainly not myself. Unresponsive to questions, uncooperative with examinations, and my speech was perseverative. Did I say it right? Anyway, during my loss of lucidity, I regained function of my legs, so much that I was able to walk again. May 9th, it seemed I had physically recovered miraculously, able to walk again. Yet, the more I excelled with my physical strength, the worse my mental status became. I have vague snippets of memories during a particular episode of regaining my mobility. I had got out of bed and gingerly headed across the hall to the nurse's desk. I think this all happened in the middle of the night, but I can't be too sure. Originally, I thought that this was the evening my mind went on vacation. What I do remember from that short walk to the nurse's desk is that it was agonizingly painful. Of course it was. I had barely wiggled a toe in a month. Getting out of bed and walking across, misplaced. Barely wiggled the toe in a month. There was, after all, after being a quadriplegic for 3 weeks, getting up out of bed and walking on my own. When I arrived at the corner of the nurse's station, they looked at me, and there was a collective gasp. Oh, down I went like a wet noodle. After this, I retained my mobility, but I could no longer follow commands or retain information. May 10th. I was no longer able to interact in a meaningful way with nursing staff or loved ones. I was talking to ghosts in my room, to friends who were not present. There were moments where I could not even recognize friends or familiar nursing staff who entered my room. I can't imagine how Kyle felt. Watching me confused and uncooperative, with no signs of lucidity. I even teased him by having a reasonable day, having meaningful conversations with him for up to an hour at a time. This was the calm before the storm. That evening I grew agitated and delirious. While reading the notes from my chart, I am horrified. It's like the doctors depict my behavior, like I was a possessed little girl from the movie The Exorcist. And that's all I end. I'm not done yet. No, that's just my excerpt. Oh, you're not getting off that easy. Come on now. I've got the biggest mouth in the room standing up here. It's just not that easy. I want Alicia to come up here, whether she wants to or not. I don't care. And I knew if I asked earlier, it wouldn't happen, so I had to put you on the spot. And I was right, eh? See? Anyway. I just want to read this quick little snippet. And the reason for writing this book wasn't because I was diagnosed with MS. It wasn't because I was upgraded to morbid variants. It wasn't even that I was dying. It was when my disease was halted and I was given a chance to live. And that's that. And this beautiful woman, I know she wants to hide and cower behind me, but I'm not going to let her. And so, because without her just knowing me, or becoming a part of me, because she really did, that's how this got done. And that cannot get overlooked. So thank you.